This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only
your home for everything journeys untouched throughout wrestling lore, all over the cosmos. Particularly when we visit cosmoses, if that is plural, that have not been.
Cosmi.
I know. Cosmi. Thank you, sir. Welcome, of course, to this month's journey through the Looking Glass. I am, of course, Scott Criscuolo, and joining me, my very good friend, the Thunder from Down Under, Mr. Dave Hall. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Scott. I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day down here in Australia, and it's always beautiful to be able to connect with you and just spend some time having a bit of fun and thinking about how our wrestling world could have been a little different at times.
Yes, I agree. It is always fun to talk to you, and I think today might have been a day, Dave. For those who have been listening to the show as long as we've had it on, thank you. We love your support. We appreciate all of your support and comments and feedback. It's always appreciated. Dave and I never have, obviously living in Australia, and me living in Connecticut. We never have the same weather. When it's summer here, it's 100. When it's winter there, it's 80. When it's summer there, it's 90, and when it's winter here, it's 9. So today it was probably in the I would say low 70s today. So here in my neck of the woods, and mix of sun, mix of clouds, but a beautiful day here as well. So we both could enjoy a nice day of weather today, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Of course, check out all of the rest of the shows here on the pod, including all the great shows my very good friend Luke Jennings does, the Memphis Continental Wrestling Cast. Of course, he rotates on Mondays between the Monday Night Project and Hamburg All-Stars. He's doing a short series right now, recapping all of the In Your Houses in history. And he is doing a new show, Crossing the Mid-Atlantic, and he's going back. It's similar to one of my favorite shows ever in the history of our network, NWA Crock and Roll, but he's going even further back. So check out the pilot. It'll be airing very soon, Crossing the Mid-Atlantic. I think you'll like it. Of course, I want to shout out to all of the other networks here in the quad. It's a new quad now. Because obviously we have the No-So. Within the No-So is the Jenny position. And we, of course, have the PTB Pop Experience, but we have our other tremendous feed run by my good friends, Mr. Kidd and Mr. Crosland. It's a fun little feed that they do, and they are doing yeoman's work of all sorts of wonderful topics. It is the Backbone Wrestling Network, and I want you to check their stuff out. They got a lot of good stuff. They're doing some territory stuff. It's a lot of fun. We're trying to take the wrestling podcast market, if there's any left, and just take it over for ourselves and just take it all. So check it out. Of course, here the PTB Wrestling Network, the No-So, the Jenny Position, the PTB Pop Experience, and of course the Backbone Wrestling Network. So networks abound. All right. So this month, the last time we did this was when we lost the great Scott Hall. We haven't done an episode honoring a all-time great that has since passed on. Of course, was it late August, I guess?
Yeah, it was only August. It's only about a week after our last episode dropped.
Yeah, we of course lost one of my personal favorite wrestlers of all time, and I know he is one of Aaron George's favorite wrestlers of all time, and that is, of course, I'll try to quote Vince from the July 1996 Raw. Psycho Sid! Pretty great. Still one of the greatest Raw moments of all time. Shawn Michaels, what have you done? You brought the devil to life! We're, of course, talking about Sid Eudy, a.k.a. Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, and, of course, Psycho Sid. And then when he was in WCW late in his career, he was just Sid. Sid passed away in late August. He was only in his, mid to late 60s. Let me try and get a confirmed year, age on that. Let's see. He died back on August 26th. Man, he was only 63.
Yeah.
Can you believe that, Dave? I didn't know he was that young.
Yeah, it is sad, and I believe he was battling. Was he dealing with cancer or?
I think so. Yeah, I think he
yeah.
was. Yeah. Mm. On my Facebook page, which has since been replaced by my Cleveland trip, I posted a picture of when I got to meet Sid back in 2013, 2014. I think that's what the date was. I was at a wrestling convention in Queens, in New York, one of the boroughs, and I met Sid, and I took a picture with him, and I told him, you were one of my favorite wrestlers ever as a kid. I wanted you to win the Royal Rumble in '92. I think Hulk Hogan screwed you. And then we talked about softball. I'm not kidding. We talked about softball bats. I am not joking. I'm not joking, Dave. We talked about softball bats. So
you know what? It wouldn't surprise. Look, you read the dirt sheets. You look at history. I think it was a toss up. What was more important to him, is softball or wrestling? And I think
know,
softball
right?
won out more often than not.
I know. I'm not winning the title. Oh, sorry. I got a tournament down in Florida. Anyway, I got to meet. He was an awesome guy. So on August 28th, we did lose Sid at the very young age of 63. And so we wanted to honor Sid. The last time we did an episode like this, Dave, if you remember, was last year when we honored, when we did a tribute episode for Scott Hall. So we're taking some moments of Sid's history. One of them we kind of touched on, I think, on a past mailbag episode. But we're really going to dive deep tonight. So we're going to try and make it quick tonight because pulling back the fourth curtain, I started some side part-time work with my company, with my client actually. So I've been up very early today. So I don't want Dave to have to talk straight for an hour. So although Dave's done it before and Dave's great at it. Dave, you're one of the few people I know that could probably do a podcast by himself and be absolutely engaged from beginning to end.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure I could quite.
I don't know if you're going to try, but anyway. So we're going to take some moments tonight. We're going to take 3 moments in Sid's career, go through the looking glass, and tweak them. I think a lot of you will probably figure out what eras in history we're going to talk about. We're not going to get into probably the one part of his history that actually worked out good for him, and that was when he was, of course, in the WWF in 96 and 97, because he didn't do too bad. He was a 2-time World Wrestling Federation champion. He got crazy-ass pops at the 96 Survivor Series at the Garden when he beat Shawn, when he stole the December to Remember moment and knocked out Jose Lothario with a camera. And, of course, he lost to Undertaker at WrestleMania 13 and then infamously crapped his pants at a house show match against Taker. But we won't get into that. So we're going to take 3 distinct moments from Sid's career and change them in an alternate universe and how we can better Sid's career. So, Dave, first off, what was your overall thoughts on Sid as a wrestler in your fandom history? Like, what were your thoughts on him? Were you a big fan? Did you like particular eras of him? What were your thoughts on Sid?
I always liked Sid. I think everyone would agree he had one of the best looks for the business ever. Mm-hmm. Naturally, like he just looked natural. He didn't look like a steroid user. He didn't look like a drug abuser or anything like that. He was big. He was muscle bound. He had a ton of charisma. He had a presence in a ring. He had that it factor that just resonated off the screen. I remember one of the like, obviously I've shared before, we didn't get a lot of NWA WCW down here, and I remember finally getting my hands on the Clash of Champions from 1989, and there's a match. It's Sid's first Clash of Champions appearance. The skyscrapers had been started, but he has a match against I think it might be Ranger Ross or something like that. And the crowd are just going nuts for him. He's a heel. He's being presented as a heel. He's wrestling as a heel, and the crowd are going nuts for him because he's just naturally charismatic. It's just yeah, he was sensational. He he radiated you just wanted to see. When he was on screen, you wanted to see him, and I always enjoyed what he brought. I was a big fan of the Skyscrapers when they started.
Me too.
I was a massive fan of them, and obviously injury curtailed that a little bit. I loved his appearance, his arrival in WWF in 92, 91, 92. I loved his return to WCW. Like, every time he arrived in a company, it was a big deal. It was something you wanted to keep an eye on, because he never showed up just in the background or having to work his way from the bottom. Every time he turned up somewhere, he was instantly someone you wanted to watch. Yeah, that's how I remember him. I actually remember the first time I ever even caught a glimpse of him or wind of him was a Pro Wrestling Illustrated article, a very famous one, Kerry Von Erich saying Sid Vicious is the most awesome man I've ever wrestled. And that sort of laid a foundation. I remember when I read that, I thought, oh, I hope I get to see this guy at some point. And then obviously, NWA, WWF, we got to see a lot of him for a few years. So, and honestly, he had a great career, and I think even within that, there's a lot of untapped potential.
I totally agree. I remember seeing Sid in the mags, and then when he started coming on TV in '89 in NWA, I said, "Holy shit, this guy's a brick shithouse." And you're right, he wasn't Lex Luger. He wasn't this like sculpted, nandroloned up guy. He was just a big friggin' dude. And he was a little wooden at times. When he wanted to, he sure could put his power moves over. Sometimes I think he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, at times in his career. We're going to talk about one of his eras that could have been a lot better for a lot of different reasons, but we'll get into that. I just marveled. I love the powerbomb. Powerbomb is one of my favorite moves of all time as a fan. And I've been a fan, Dave, for, oh my God, do I even count anymore? 43 years. If I had to rank my finishers or moves, I've always put the power bomb in my top three, and he delivered it like nobody at the time, because the power bomb really wasn't used that much in the late 80s, early 90s. It was not a move that was prevalent. We didn't really see it till probably the mid 90s when there were bigger guys, particularly in WCW. So I've always been a fan, and when he finally won the WWF title at Survivor Series 96, I was very, very excited. I didn't hate Shawn by any stretch, but I just loved Sid. Sid was just awesome. So I was very pumped, and I was bummed when he left in 97. Came back for that cup of coffee, and then his time in WCW in 98 on was just a mess, just like everything else in WCW. Those last 3 years were a mess. Yeah. It's a shame. But I always was a Sid guy. Always followed him in the mags. I had his pictures. I used to cut him out and put him on my wall. I was definitely a Sid guy. So I was very sad when I found out he passed away. I was very sad. One of my favorites. So tonight, you and I, Dave, are going to honor the greatness that is Sid by going through three distinct moments or stretches of his career and go through the looking glass and kind of fix them for him. He's earned it. Uh, let's begin. Send us off on our first journey. Where are we going first?
Well, I think it'd be really interesting to have like Sid, like we said, Sid really just burst onto the scene from a national perspective in 1989.
Yep.
The Mags had talked him up, but he burst onto the scene in a big way. NWA WCW 1989. He hits the ground running and he's put into this tag team with Danny Spivey, the Skyscrapers. What I think is had the potential to be one of the greatest tag teams ever. They were just fantastic. You had, as you said earlier, Sid was still young at this point, a little bit wooden at time. I think they intentionally tagged him up with Dan Spivey to just help getting a bit of seasoning, someone he could learn from, he could learn the ropes, and they just gelled. They worked. Two big guys.
Mm-hmm.
Sid had this charisma. They had this. I mean, the first time I ever saw them was the Great American Bash '89 event, winning the 2-ring battle royal, and then absolutely destroying the Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas, dynamic dudes.
Right.
They were just sensational, and I think part of the issue is they were sent on a trajectory. They wanted these guys to feud with the Road Warriors. It was really being built, the team of the 90s versus the team of the 80s. That's where they were headed.
Yeah.
And you're sort of moving in that direction. And then, in my opinion, one of the worst booking decisions one of the few bad booking decisions that WCW made in 1989, they matched the Skyscrapers up against the Steiner brothers at Clash of Champions after, late in the year in November, and Sid suffers a punctured lung in the match and he's out injured for a few months. Now, I think it was a bad booking decision because I think they should have kept those two teams apart as long as they could. Like, you're heading the Skyscrapers towards the Road Warriors. That should be the trajectory, knowing that the Steiner brothers are on the up as well. Why blow off that match early when you could build that as your future world title feud?
Right.
And let that go. And I think that was their first big mistake, and they paid for it. The rough style of the Steiner brothers results in Sid getting a lung injury, and he's out for a while. So I think the first change I would have made is I would have kept them apart. I think I would have started the Road Warriors feud at that event, whether you do it as a tag match with a some sort of schmoz finish, double DQ, double count out, whatever. But I really think they should have been building towards, the Skyscrapers becoming this dominant heel tag team. And it's a shame that injury happened. That's the first thing I think I wish they would have changed. But if we just take in the fact that we had this injury, I think the other bad thing they did was they kept him out of the spotlight for months. He injured his lung, but they brought in Mark Callis, the future Undertaker, to sort of sub in for him in the tag team. I would have kept Sid with him. I would have had them as a 6-man pairing on screen. You could have had Sid at ringside interfering, doing stuff, really keep him prominent so that when he returned, you've got that tag team spot ready and lined up and ready to go. And I think that's where they really should have. I think they should have kept the link between Sid and Mark and Danny Spivey going. They could have feuded with the Road Warriors. Sid could have been interfering from the outside. But you always knew Sid was destined for bigger things. And I think by having in that 6-man context, when he was ready to come back in the ring, you could have him. I would have had him. I wouldn't have brought him back in the Horsemen. I think that was the first big wrong move that the NWA made. They put him with the Horsemen. It was a big mistake. Yes, he gets the rub of working with Rick and Arn and Barry Windham and stuff, but it wasn't the right move for Sid's career. What would have been the best? This is how I would have played 1989-90, assuming that we still get the lung injury. As I said, I would have kept him linked to the Skyscrapers, coming down as a six-man group, standing at ringside, interfering when he can. He's got a punctured lung. Doesn't mean he can't get in the ring and powerbomb someone when the referee's back's turned. I think doing stuff like that would have had the crowd just anticipating his involvement each week. You could have had him doing interviews with the Skyscrapers and Teddy Long, really making that image of him being the breakout star ready when he comes back. Bring him back with a couple of matches with Mark Callison. Danny Spivey had left by that point, but bring him back in with a couple of matches. And I think it becomes clear you bust the Skyscrapers up. You have them maybe eventually losing to the Road Warriors. That was the long term, the storyline. So you could have them lose to the Road Warriors, and you could have Sid basically powerbomb, whether it be Mark Callistan, Spivey, powerbomb them when he's done. Finish him off. He moves singles, and then he just goes on an absolute tear. I think he starts just plowing through the competition, powerbombing guys, winning matches quick, big, strong guy, building him up properly for a match against Sting. The biggest criticism of Sting's first championship reign in 1990 was they didn't have anyone ready for him or weren't building properly. And
interesting. That's similar to his old Blade Runner's partner who was champion in another promotion in 1990.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Wow.
Whatever. They just didn't have anyone ready. And they had put Sid in with the Horsemen, and they were playing mind games with Sting, and Sid was always playing second fiddle to Ric Flair and Barry Windham. And even though he got a title match at Halloween Havoc, it was all around the Horseman mind game stuff and all that crap that was going on with there. I think if you keep him away from the Horseman, you could have him go on a big Terry power bombs guys. He's beating. He can work through the faces. He can beat Brian Pillman. He can beat Tommy Rich. He can, beat down tag team, the Rock and Roll Express. He can beat up these guys heading for the big payoff match with Sting. Sting's working the Horseman, and then Sid's ready to go against Sting. And I honestly think the charisma that he brought to the ring, they could have really considered putting the world title on Sid in late 1990. Imagine 1989 Starrcade, 1990 Starrcade, he and Sid, maybe they have some sort of battle, their first meeting in the ring without the Horseman. Maybe it's a double counter. Maybe Sid gets disqualified. He grabs a chair and starts beating on Sting in the ring and gets disqualified, power bombs him, leaves him lying. And everyone's thinking, what's going to happen next? Can Sting survive the power? And you put them in the main event at Starrcade. And at this point, you've probably already decided to take the belt off Sting. Why not put it on Sid and give him a run as a heel at the start, and maybe even, turning babyface there, but Sid versus Sting at Starrcade 90, I think would have drawn a good crowd. I think it would have drawn a good buy rate, because you've got this idea of Sid, the massive hulking monster, versus Sting, the babyface champion, that can he beat this big guy? And you could have Sid take the belt so that all of a sudden Sting becomes the hunter again. Can he regain the title? Can he get it back? I think that's what should have happened with Sid the first time around. Champion within his first 18 months in the company, I think would have been very accepted by the fan base. I think it would have been a perfect build to create your new heel monster champion, a guy that would give Sting a genuine challenge, and the fans would be wondering if Sting could even beat this guy.
I am all in favor of that whole plan. I'm in favor of that whole plan. I would have definitely. I think the thing that I'm totally 100% agree with you on, and I felt that it was kind of a miss, is when he did get hurt when he was with the Skyscrapers. I don't understand why you just replaced him. I think that was major short-sightedness on the part of the NWA booking committee to not have Sid stay on camera and be a trio with Spivey and then obviously me, Mark Callis would come in, because you got these three monsters, and they could just start laying waste to other menial tag teams. Maybe I would dare to say, Dave, maybe at some point you make them the United States Tag Team Champions and have them play the Freebird role. Maybe have, once Sid's lung was healed enough to where he could do a couple of moves and have one of the other two guys kind of do the yeoman's work and then tag Sid in, powerbomb goodbye. Once it's healthy enough. You don't want to do it when it's not, obviously, because you don't want to mess with lungs and stuff. And then you've got him continued to build. He had the most charisma of all of that trio, obviously, at the time. Obviously, me, Mark Callis would pivot. different topic for another day, but you've got Sid still on camera. You've got him still in the line of sight of the fans, and then you build to 1990, and he starts pummeling guys, and then he beats. And then meanwhile, Sting beats Flair at the Bash 90, and you continue to build, and then you don't have to deal with. Here's another thing too. Because one thing about our alternate journeys, Dave, everything has consequences. Everything ripples. So Sid beats Sting at Starrcade 90. You get into 91, Sid's your champion. You don't have to worry about Flair as champion. You don't have to deal with the belt as part of the whole rigmarole between him and Jim Herd. And then when Flair leaves to go to the WWF in the summer-fall of 1991, you don't have to worry about the belt and go through all that rigmarole. Sadly, we don't get the cool, blurred out belts thing because, that's cool. But, if you could really because the baby faces, here's the thing, Dave, and I think this was the same problem that, as I alluded to jokingly earlier, same problem the Ultimate Warrior had when he was WWF champion in 1990. Both sides had an immense amount of baby faces. NWA 1990 had a ton of good baby faces, but neither side had really good top flight established main event heels. And it's funny how we talk about the Blade Runners, and eventually both guys were world champions in their respective promotions, and they both suffered from the same problem. No opponents. Warrior's problem was Hulk Hogan vanquished all the good bad guys. Sting's problem was there weren't any real, other than Flair, there weren't any really good laid out main event heels, which is short-sightedness on the part of NWA.
It is. It really played into the idea, like the NWA WCW was so built around the Horsemen, and I love Ric Flair. You and I both, we've talked about our love for Ric Flair.
Of course. Yep.
We're not taking anything away from Flair or the rest, or Arn or Barry, but it can only be so many times that those guys are in those spots against the same. I mean, that was what was so intriguing when Sting came on the scene in 88, was because it wasn't just Flair versus Dusty and Ronnie Garvin and Jim Garvin and stuff anymore. It was a new challenge for Flair. And then you had Luger at the same time. So all of a sudden Flair had two new challenges, and it revitalized things, then Steamboat and so on. Sting had the problem in reverse. They built the company around their heel Horsemen for so much. They didn't have the other guys around. And that was why I think Muda and Sid and those guys were so popular in 89 with the fans, is because these are these new heels that have got potential to be breakout stars. And sadly, Muda leaves and Sid gets misused. But if you had them both in 90, like I said, you could build Sid up to be the big, massive challenger for Sting. He gets through Sting, then he's got to deal with Luger. Then you've got the next, you've got babyface Luger ready to go as the next cab off the rank. And, it might be that Luger vanquishes Sid to claim his first world title. That makes it a big deal. When you've had this monster on the run, the babyface that beats the monster comes over in a bigger way, and that's a great thing. And that's what I think Sid would have brought to that role in 1990 and early 91 for the NWA, is he brings a legitimacy because of his size, because of his charisma, because of his natural appeal. He's someone that people wanted to see. The big thing would have been keeping him heel. And the way to do that is just to have him beat the snot out of the guys that you love the most, your Stings and your Lugers. It would have kept him heel.
Yeah, I feel like it was, I feel like it was very easy to do that. And you could have really, painted Sid as this absolute monster and made it real easy. Have, just mid-level, mid-range in terms of like duration, main event matches, and then focus on the mid-card, focus on the smaller guys, get great matches out of them, boost the tag division, boost the Steiners. And I think Sid eventually could have been vanquished by somebody. Maybe Sting. Maybe you keep Sid champion the whole year, and then maybe Sting wins in the rematch a year later at Starrcade 91. Yeah. You make Sid champion, and Sid never leaves to go to the WWF, which also changes history. Now, our next journey counters that, but that's why we have multiple looking glasses. We have an entire menagerie of glasses to look through. So in this specific universe, I don't think Sid goes to the WWF in 1991. Why would he?
No.
He's on top of the mountain.
And that's the picture. You've got this big, long heel run, but his natural charisma, when Sting beats him, you could almost see this massive hulking Sid reaching out his hand and shaking hands with the guy who's finally beaten him.
Yep.
And in the process, you turn Sid babyface. And now all of a sudden, the big monster who overpowers everyone is someone the fans can get behind. And he works with Sting to take on new challenges and you're bringing in, obviously you would need to have other heels being built up, but you could turn him babyface, and then he goes on that run and becomes the babyface hero of the people. Everyone talked about Sid being, and on this we'll touch on this with our next rabbit hole that we'll jump down. But everyone was talking about, like, Sting, could he be the next Hulk Hogan? Could he be WCW's Hulk Hogan? You turn him babyface after a great heel run. Who knows what that run might have been like, and the draw that he might have become as the super babyface champion.
Yeah, and eventually, maybe in 92, when you're dealing with Sid and kind of Vader coming in. And now suddenly you've got Sid and Vader, which takes us to another. I can't believe this rabbit hole is connected to the other rabbit holes, because we start talking about Vader in 92. That goes into 93. But that's a whole other can of worms. It's amazing how much it may or may not change 1992 WWF, but we're going to get to that in a second. With Flair gone, because in our alternate universe here, Prime 2, if you will, I think Flair still leaves. I think Flair still goes to the WWF in 91. So you do have to build up some guys. You build up Ron Simmons. I think Ron Simmons and Sid could have some amazing power matches.
Yes.
Power slams, power bombs, just meat slapping meat. And Steiner Brothers, Rick and Scott, maybe singles matches on clashes. And then you perhaps get to Sid and Vader in the back end of 92. If Sting is champion, and he faces other guys. And then you kind of matriculate, and I think eventually Sid probably does end up going to the WWF that second time in 1995. I have a feeling that still happens, because obviously the landscape in WCW changes in 94 when Hogan gets there. So, but I think if you focus on him on camera in late 89 into early 90 and keep him in the consciousness of the fans, then you do have a guy that could give Sting an amazing main event match at Starrcade 90. He wins the world title. And he goes through 91, establishing himself as a beast, taking guys out left and right, still gets booed. Most guys will cheer him. And then Sting gets the win back a year later at Starrcade 91. And then we'll see what happens with Sid in 92. Maybe he feuds with Vader. Maybe he feuds with Ron Simmons. Maybe he ends up going to the WWF anyway. I don't know. But in this Prime 2, he definitely is not going in 91, because he'll be the world champion at least through the end of the year. So I think we found ourselves a pretty good alternate course that Sid could have taken. But what it really comes down to is that if he is given the showcase at the end of 89, things would have worked out better for him in 90 and 91.
Yeah.
And he may not leave for the WWF. In fact, if we go the way we want to, he doesn't go to the WWF. So,
yeah.
All right. With that, we branch to the next rabbit hole, which is another universe where none of this happens and something else happens. Set us up, Dave.
Well, I think like we've touched on, the big thing that happened with Sid is he wasn't happy with the direction things were going, and in 91, he wasn't happy with that direction. I think he was, and I agree, he was being misused, and the Vince McMahon came along with the offer that Sid couldn't refuse at the time, and he jumped ship in, what was it, June, July 1991, jumped ship, and Sid Justice was born. Sid Justice enters the WWF and begins his journey to the top. Now, rumors have it that he was promised the main event against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. But we all know that he ends up wrestling Hogan at WrestleMania 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big moment in his career. But I think we backtrack from there. Sid comes in, has to deal with injury again, but he's still very prominent. We've got that Royal Rumble moment where everyone cheered him as he pulled Hogan out of the ring. As he thumped Hogan out of the ring, and then he turns heel and faces Hogan at WrestleMania, and then almost not long after that, he's gone. He's left the company out. Allegedly, apparently, again, financial issues with how much he was being paid, and issues with the direction that his character was being taken is what I've heard are the reasons that Sid left. And the question always remains: what if he'd stayed? What if the guy who was the first man to ever kick out of Hulk Hogan's leg drop had stayed in the company in 1992? Where would things have gone for him? What might have happened? So, that's what we want to look at. And Scott, I'll give you first shot at this one. What do you see? What might have been the WWF trajectory for Sid Justice?
Well, what I would have done is, I think Sid beats. We have the match at WrestleMania VIII with Hogan, which ends in a mishmash mess. Sid sticks around. Hogan's gone. You build Sid up, and instead of Warrior and that whole weird what's Flair going to do thing while he had vertigo or whatever, I have Savage and Sid at SummerSlam, and I have Sid absolutely destroy him.
Wow.
And you begin the reign of terror, because you can hold off on Yokozuna, because I have Sid being world champion all the way to WrestleMania 9. And I have Sid and Brett. That's what I have. I think Brett wins the Rumble. Sid, you have maybe Sid, and you have a 6-man tag with Sid, Flair, and Scott Hall, maybe, and Razor against Perfect, Brett, and somebody, Savage, probably. And then you have maybe Sid and perhaps Taker at WrestleMania 9 in a world title match, and that's where we get Giant Gonzalez, unfortunately. Brett wins the Rumble, and you have Brett beat Sid at WrestleMania 9, and we have no Hogan nonsense. Because instead of Brett being champion and Sid and Vince having cold feet and having to do that with Hogan, Vince has utmost faith in heel Sid throughout 92 into 93. He's your face of your heels as we start Monday Night Raw as a show. And you give him some solid title matches on Raw. He's powerbombing guys. He's throwing guys off the balcony or whatever. I mean, like, you just make him an absolute juggernaut. Because with a guy, it's, it's funny, Dave. I understand wrestling booking's not supposed to be easy. I understand that. But just think about this. When you look at a guy like Sid, how hard can it be? How hard can it be? The guy is a beast. And he's got the charisma. And he's got an aura. It's not hard to make a guy like Sid that dominant, being a babyface or a heel. And in this instance, you're having him take out the Savages, and he's taking out the Bulldogs, and he starts plowing through the babyface roster. You get to the Royal Rumble, he's staring Taker in the face. They have a plausibly decent match. They're not as experienced in that aspect as they would be 4 years later. I get that. But you give the two of them a match at the Royal Rumble. And Giant Gonzalez interferes, and then Taker unfortunately has to go on that fucking slop fest. Brett wins the Rumble, and you get Brett and Sid main eventing WrestleMania 9, I think you get a much better ending.
It's I don't think I'd disagree with that. Much better ending. I think you really nailed something there, and that is Sid taking the belt from Savage. We know that for whatever reason, Vince wasn't happy with the drawing power that Savage had in that title reign in '92. And even though they did the Sid Ultimate Warrior match at SummerSlam, they return to the TV tapings a couple of days later in the US, and the belt's back on Flair. So they'd already made the call. Vince had made the decision the belt was coming off Savage at that SummerSlam time. So I think if Sid had stayed, imagine that it's Sid. He's a guy who he didn't lose by pinfall to Hogan. He lost by DQ. He kicked out of the leg drop, and he comes on TV. Heels being heels, the truth gets distorted. He comes on TV after WrestleMania and says Hogan has left the company because he couldn't beat me. Hogan is scared of me and he's run away. I am the man. I am the master and ruler of the world. I'm Sid, and I want the title. And you build up to Savage facing him at SummerSlam. Yeah, through the build up, you could have the Warrior return. Maybe Warrior and Sid have some house show matches. You don't do much on television, but they could be working the house shows. But you build up. Sid beats Savage at SummerSlam. It's the middle of the card. Maybe, Ric Flair can interfere for all I care. I mean, Sid's a heel. If he's a heel now, it doesn't matter if Flair interferes a little bit.
Right.
Sid is still winning. It's middle of the card main event. You can have Sid win there because you've got Brett and Davey later on the card. They're gonna send the fans home happy. So Sid wins the belt. Sid then starts. He can start battling Ultimate Warrior in title defenses. You go down there, 6-man tag match. You do SummerSlam. A Survivor Series could be a 6-man tag. It could be a Survivor Series style tag match. Sid and Flair and Razor and someone else against Brett and against Randy and Warrior and maybe Brett and whatever. Warrior leaves, Perfect switches sides. That allows Sid to start facing Razor for the title, start facing Flair, beat them a little bit. As you said, you go to the Rumble. He could face Undertaker. So he's done the gauntlet through. And then, like you said, the winner of the Rumble goes up against Sid, and that could be the elevation of Brett. Brett wins the Rumble. Brett goes on to face Sid at WrestleMania. I think that's a great pinnacle moment, and Brett's going to make Sid look good in the ring. And Sid's probably looked good up till now. The storyline is, can Brett survive the monster? We talked about this before. You've got this monster heel champion on a tear, beating everyone. The plucky babyface. Can he survive? Can he do it?
Right.
If you wanted to, you could carry it further. And now I'm just going to have some fun here. I wasn't thinking of doing this, but let's just say you carry it a bit further. Sure. He beats Brett at WrestleMania.
Okay.
We've already said Sid has charisma. He has it factor. He has it all. So going on this tear run as the champion, perhaps Sid starts getting the babyface cheers again. The crowd love him. The crowd like what they're seeing. And then you get to the Intrepid. And Yokozuna can still be built up. He can still be the anti-American heel, spitting in the face of America, beating everyone he faces. Yes, he didn't win the Rumble, but he's beating everyone he faces. And he lays the challenge down at the Intrepid. No one can body slam me. No one can do it. And it's not Lex Luger who gets off the helicopter. It's the world champion Sid who gets off the helicopter. And he doesn't need to hip toss because he's big enough and strong enough to slam Yokozuna. And the challenge is set for SummerSlam. World title, defending champion Sid versus Yokozuna. When they meet...
You make my heart warm, Dave.
You love that one, don't you?
I do. Like that. I absolutely do. I would have been totally, and I was in college, totally going back to marking out like a 9-year-old if Sid fucking slammed Yoko on the Intrepid. That would have been awesome. Awesome.
And you get to SummerSlam, and now the crowd are behind Sid. And then you do the unthinkable. Yoko beats Sid for the title. Outside interference, Ludwig Borger runs in. The Quebecers run in. Whoever, they all run in. And Yoko beats Sid for the belt. And then the journey starts. Sid wants the rematch. And Cornette and Fuji refuse. We will not give you a rematch. Never. You're never getting the rematch. So what does Sid have to do? He goes to... We get Survivor Series. He's the captain of the team. He leads the team to victory, but obviously can't get the title shot. We go to Royal Rumble, and Sid wins the Rumble. And at WrestleMania 10, Sid gets his rematch for the championship and takes it back.
Could you just imagine that Garden crowd? Oh, Dave, you make me warm. This is why I do this show. Oh, man. How amazing would that have been? Could you imagine that crowd at the Garden? Oh my God! You could still have Brett, you could still do Brett and Owen.
Oh yeah!
And what a WrestleMania overall that would have been. Sid, you have Brett Owen, Sid,
Sean Razor,
and Sean and Razor. I approve.
And the story was always Vince wanted the next Hulk Hogan. You've organically created him that way. You've organically had the crowd come behind Sid anyway. They're building it. You can hear that the crowd are cheering him, but he's still being the heel. The crowd want the babyface turn, so you use the Intrepid to turn to build on that momentum. So it's not this Luger thing of he just turns up and all of a sudden now he's the babyface and you got to get behind him. The crowd would have been getting behind Sid on that run. You know they would have because of who he is and how he came across.
Oh my God!
So now
totally.
you're just letting giving the fans what they want, the opportunity to cheer Sid. Take the belt off him, and now you want everyone. We want him back. We want him as our babyface champion. Give him the shot. Nah, we're not giving him a shot. We're not giving him a shot. He deserves it. He won at the Survivor Series. He deserves a shot. No, we're refusing. We're not giving him the shot. He wins the Rumble. You can't take the shot away. You're talking a massive buy rate. You're talking, yeah, and Vince has his new Hulk Hogan to run the gauntlet.
Oh man. Wow. I was wow. The Intrepid thing makes me tear. Makes me misty, Dave. And then you get then Yoko beats him and they bob and weave and duck him. Kind of like the way, as I'm watching on one of my timelines now, kind of the way Brock was handled in late 2002 going into 2003 heading towards WrestleMania 19. He's getting ducked and avoided because he's the monster. I think you do the same thing. And, the next time I'm on with JR, I want to ask him, what do you think, because he was, of course, at the 94 Royal Rumble at the PCC, the Providence Civic Center. I want to ask him, what would you have done if Sid was around and he won the Rumble? What would the dunk, what would the pop have been for Sid? Babyface Sid, after losing the title to Yoko at SummerSlam, tell me what you think would have happened had Sid won the Rumble in '94? I got to ask him that. I'm actually doing a show with him this week. Shh.
Nice.
Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. Shh. You'll hear more about that in the coming days. And then walking in as the monster babyface challenger at Madison Square Garden. Oh my God, Dave. Dave, do you print money in Australia? Do you just have a vintage money printer? Because my God, would that place have gone? I mean, it was a sellout anyway, but oh my God, that place would have gone nuts.
Would have gone banana.
And Sid conquers. Holds the belt for a while, and eventually, he drops it, and then he kind of, slips down the card a little bit, and, we let some other people. And then who knows? Maybe at some point he leaves and goes to WCW. And maybe he's not around in 95 and he's in WCW instead. Maybe we flip the script. Who knows? But
and the only person who loses, look, in this universe, in this timeline, the big loser in all that is Bret Hart. But
absolutely. Yeah.
I am sure you are building, but then I think what you have happening underneath is you have Bret Hart being built almost into that Daniel Bryan type of role of the crowd are behind him. The crowd want to see this guy get a shot at some point. He doesn't get a shot, not because people are ducking him, just you've got this big champion in Sid. But then when you take the title again off Sid the second time, you've got this babyface who's been built and built and built and overcome all the odds, and he's never been able to get that shot, and he finally gets his shot. And I think the crowd would be ready to get behind Bret in that circumstance.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, no, I think Bret will still, his timeline may have to be delayed a little bit, but I still think you could build Bret up as a future champion. I don't doubt that at all. But if you could take advantage of Sid being that over while letting Bret kind of percolate a little bit in the mid card, I don't see the problem in that. And then you slowly build Shawn, and you still got a solid mid card. And maybe, again, rippling down the line, if Bret Hart's timeline starts later, maybe there is no Montreal, and maybe he doesn't leave in 97. And maybe Sid's still around and we go into 98, Sid in the Attitude Era. That might be another discussion for another day.
Can you imagine Sid and I know they were around at this point, but if you built Sid up as this over the years like this, Sid almost being the front, like the forerunner, it's not just the Hart Foundation versus Steve Austin, it's the Hart Foundation versus Steve Austin and Sid. Mm-hmm. Who you've got, you've got this long-term big baby face, Bret. Therein lies the thing. The crowd are turning on me because you're cheering this Steve Austin guy, and for years you've preferred Sid to me. I've always been better than him. Like it just filters into that Hart Foundation storyline so nicely.
Yep. It totally does. And I think we would have had a blast watching Sid develop through those 2 years into arguably could have been one of the best babyface champions in the history of the company. And I think it would have drastically made the mid-90s a little bit more tolerable to watch in that aspect as well. All right. Let us know what you think about that. Let us know, because I particularly like the way Dave and I just painted 2 years of what could have been an absolute mess of programming and what we ended up handing you. So let us know. All right, one more. This one's a little tricky, but we're going to try to work it, Dave. Paint the picture.
Well, I think you've already started painting the picture, talking about fixing a mess in the 90s and perhaps this babyface run in the 90s as a champion. Look, we all know, anyone who is a wrestling fan and anyone who is a fan of Sid knows that in 1993 at Starrcade, Sid was supposed to win the WCW championship from Vader. That was the plan. He'd come in, he'd teamed with Vader for a while, but they were going to turn Sid babyface. They recorded it all. They had all the plans going. And then, of course, we had the unsavory incident between he and Arn, and the rails fell off, and Sid was gone, and they had to shift direction. And we've, as you mentioned, we have referenced this and touched on this a little bit before, but question has to be, what would things have looked like in WCW if Sid had won the belt? If Sid had not, if the Arn Anderson Sid Vicious incident didn't happen in England, and Sid went on to win the title from Vader at Starrcade 1993. I think this is a very interesting journey, because this was what was supposed to happen. We're not theorizing it would have been nice. Oh, how fun would it have been if he won that title there, or if he'd turned babyface there. He was going to turn babyface. He was going to face Sid, and he was going to win the title.
Yep.
Where to? Where do we go? What happens?
Mm-hmm.
I think, first and foremost, the journey that Vader had as champion, you know that you've got to have a rematch. I think the very first thing you're building to is the rematch at Super Clash between Sid and Vader. I don't think there's any doubt about it. You've had Vader.
Super Brawl.
Super Brawl, sorry.
Super Brawl.
He was such a long-term champion, you would have to have the rematch. Was it a fluke? Was it whatever? Sid wins twice. No need for help. No need for interference. Sid is going to win both times. Absolutely. Second time's probably in a cage. Oh, pardon me. In a cage, or in a... you could have a bit of a gimmick. It might be a cage match. It might be a lumberjack. Who cares? Sid's still going to win. And where do we go from there? I think the great thing about WCW is there were things laid out already. I think if Sid stays, I think we see Ric Flair heel turn much earlier, because I think he becomes the next challenger after Vader. I think Flair wants the title. Who's got the title? Sid. I want it. Flair turns heel. Sid beats Flair. Then you can have Flair shunt off and start his preparations for the arrival of Hulk Hogan. Sid then he can then start a series of matches with Rick Rude. Who is the real world champion? Sid or Rick Rude? He beats Rick Rude. He unifies the titles. This is what I would probably do. You want to make money for the company. You've got this babyface Sid being built. He's going. You build up that beach blast match, or Bash at the Beach match. Hogan comes in. Everyone wants to see Hogan versus Flair. Hogan doesn't need a title shot to start with. You put him with Flair as the special main event. I don't care. And then Sid and Rude can meet in the other double main event match to unify the world titles.
Right.
And now you've got it. Titles are unified. Sid is the sole champion while Hogan is dealing with Flair. That allows Sid, he can beat on some other heels for a couple of months. He can beat on if we look at that time period, you've got Kevin Sullivan's little group starting to build. He can beat on a couple of scrubs over there. He can just remain that dominant champion until Hogan finishes with Flair. And then you line them up. Starrcade 94, Sid versus Hogan for the title. You could possibly turn Sid heel, or you could keep him babyface and go babyface on babyface. I don't think it matters. I think a long-term Sid champion versus Hogan, who's just come into the company, beaten Flair. He's now got momentum. hit them up at Starrcade 94. I think you've got a massive buy rate, and you've got a match that will be much better than Hogan versus Beefcake. But that match allows you, the WCW played on history. How great would it be? Hogan beats Flair, and Hogan starts going, I want a shot. And Sid just looks at the camera. That's fine. You've never beaten me. In fact, the last time we faced each other, I kicked out of your leg drop. I'm the only man to have ever done that.
Yep.
You've never kicked out of my power bomb. And I'm coming for you. Build it up and print the money.
Yep. Yeah. What I was waiting for, and you spun it very well, is I was waiting for how you were going to intricate Hogan into it. Obviously, and like we said, everybody, it was a fact that what we're giving you now was supposed to be the prime decision. Sid was indeed supposed to beat Vader at Starrcade 93 if Sid and Arn didn't start doing arts and crafts at 3 o'clock in the morning. That happens. And yeah, your timeline, while the Hogan announcement starts burbling through in the spring. And you're right. Hogan and Flair, still the main event of Bash at the Beach. Sorry, Hogan, you don't get the belt right out of the gate. Sorry, I'm making some money here. You're going to have to wait. Now, can we trust Bischoff not to make a stupid decision? I don't know. But since this is our show, we get to say it. So we're going to say that Bischoff puts the hammer down and tells Hogan, you get your match with Flair at Bash at the Beach, your big debut in WCW, but we're gonna long game it for your world title shot. And I like that. And I still think it makes Bash at the Beach a better show. I mean, it had more buys in the Prime world than King of the Ring did anyway. That's not it's not hard. That show is marginally bad. But with Nitro, well, I guess over a year away. But now with Hogan there, now you're starting to build, and we get some interesting rematches through Fall Brawl, through Halloween Havoc. And
try it like this. Here's your trajectory. Bash at the Beach. As I said, Hogan faces Flair for the first time. Sid wins the belt.
Right.
They then were due to have the Clash of Champions match. Okay? Because I'm looking at the Hogan side of things at the moment. Because they did the 3 matches. They did the Bash at the Beach. They did the Clash of Champions. And then they did Halloween Havoc. They were the 3 Flair Hogan matches on the journey. And all stuffed up. But imagine if the second match on the journey was Hogan and Sid versus Flair and Arn. Right? Hogan, that you run it as a tag match. And during the match, because all the criticism was, well, why would anyone watch the third Hogan-Flair match? Because Hogan won the first 2 anyway. So in this tag team match, something goes wrong, and Sid accidentally clocks Hogan. How? I don't know. Whatever. It's an accident. It's a clear accident the way it's visually pictured. But as a result, Flair gets the pin on Hogan as a result of this incident. Hogan's angry and annoyed at Sid, but realizes it was an accident. Sid and Hogan and Flair do their Halloween Havoc match. Sid keeps his title with whoever he faces, but now you've got some backstory to it. Not only has Hogan beat Flair, but the only reason he lost to Flair was because Sid got involved. Sid accidentally knocked him down, knocked him out, made him lose. So you're creating your story, your inner story as well. And then it could be, then you bring in the history. As I said, you talk about WrestleMania, you talk about the past, whatever you want to do, whether Flair turns. But I love that idea of Hogan and Sid versus the Horsemen versus Flair and Arn. I think that'd be a fun match.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now again, in our universe, this has to work for him, brother. And in our worlds, it always does. We're not going to we're not gonna, tweak that at all. But
Well, it'll work for him because it's setting up Starrcade, and he's gonna win. He's gonna win the title at Starrcade. You're gonna
he
put
will.
the belt on Hogan there, so it's part of a longer story. Of course, it's gonna work for him because he's not losing a title right off the gate, which is what would have happened if Flair had won when he was world champion. You've got a bigger picture to look at, and
Right.
you're building to the title.
Yep. Yeah. And then, maybe they rematch at the beginning of 95, and then maybe, we go from there. Yeah, I think
and then where do we go from there? Well, Hogan's now the champ, and Sid realizes there's nowhere else for me to go. And next thing you know, he's turning up in WWF.
That's true. He ends up being Shawn's muscle anyway, but with a lot more cred.
Oh, imagine you're bringing in the guy who's just dropped the world title to Hogan. Imagine, like, I know WWF didn't like playing on history, but the fans would know, the media would know.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that picture of the recently dethroned world champion Sid versus Diesel. Diesel beating the guy that, has just been in the ring with Hogan. I think that gives Diesel a little more credibility in the eyes of the fans.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And then Hogan can get his feud with Beefcake. And make 1995 even crappier than it ended up being. Yeah, I think, Dave, that was fantastic. I think that's a good timeline to kind of navigate the waters of Hogan's arrival in WCW without, deflating any egos. And it makes for better matches, to be honest. It makes for better matches. So there you go, folks. There is 3 to honor in this special tribute episode where we honor the great Sid. We gave you 3 moments in his timeline: NWA 89 to 91, WWF 92 to maybe 94, or WCW 93 to maybe 95-ish. And again, the only part of his career we kept was 96, 97, because you can't really do much better than that. Except maybe he doesn't poop his pants in the match with Taker, but who knows? Who knows if that's even a factor, an urban legend.
But I think you look at, we're talking about a tribute to Sid. I think the amazing thing is we've done 3 journeys here, all of which end up with Sid as world champion. And in
Correct.
all three of them, I think any wrestling fan sitting here going, that's actually credible. That actually could have happened and could have worked. And there's the legacy of Sid. Wherever he went, he was a top guy almost immediately. He was always in the picture. And if he became a world champion at any point, it would have been acceptable. And that's why his run in 96, 97 worked in WWF so well. And even 95, coming in, he was straight in against Diesel. You accepted that. And when he returned to WCW in 98, 99, he was straight back into that upper echelon, Diesel and Goldberg and Nash and Hall, and being world champion and losing the championship. Like it was always at the top of the card. He was always at the top, and that's, I think, the legacy of who Sid was. He was always at the top.
Mm-hmm. Because he just has that look. He had that look, and if booked properly, with a little time and a little creativity, he could have been just amazing even from 89 through 95. If those waters could have been navigated in different ways, shapes, or forms,
He's had a Hall of Fame career. It is a real shame that he won't be able to accept it in person, but I think everyone knows he will probably go into the WWF Hall of Fame next year.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. But can you imagine a little bit better booking and looking after the guy, looking after him a little bit more? You could be talking about one of the best ever.
Yeah.
You really could have been.
Absolutely. Totally. I mean, unfortunately, it's sad that when we do an episode like this or we honor someone who's left us, that I feel like we seem to always get lost opportunities, and it's sad. It's a shame. So there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed our wonderful tribute to the great Sid Eudy, aka Sid Vicious, a.k.a. Sid Justice, a.k.a. Psycho Sid. Dave, where can everyone find you? Because we know where we can find you, but I like the way you describe it.
Look, you can reach out to me through Facebook. I always lurk the pages. Send me a message, touch base. Love to hear from you. And if you want to hear more of me, we talked about the quarter pods earlier. You can catch me on the Chronoso over on the North-South connection. A lot of the guys that were mentioned earlier, Luke Jennings and Keithy Langston and guys like that, all pop up. And we've just dropped our most recent episode in the build up to Royal Rumble 90, early 1990. But I got the opportunity to play a little role in there. I was involved in a discussion ranking the top 10 tag teams of essentially 1985 to end of 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also available on the North-South Connections YouTube channel. So check it out. Who are the top 10? Where do they sit? Who was number one? I'm not going to spoil it for you now, but if you guys know anything about me, you know who's number one's going to be. But that was a lot of fun. So check that out.
Yep. I may be having a little tag team fun in the works. Keep an eye on both the PTB Wrestling Network and the No-So for a tag team show where arguably the greatest podcast tag team of all time maybe reunites.
Undoubtedly.
Maybe. Maybe. Obviously follow me on Twitter and Facebook and the Place to Be page. Thank you for your vote. Coming up later this month will be the September episode of Wrestle Tracks with myself and the Dean Machine, Greg Diener. Once again, you guys picked the longest show. I always tease you about it, but I did another ballot where 2 of the 3 shows were short, and you picked the one that's not. That's because I always pick great shows in the ballot. But we are going to do Terry Funk's WrestleFest. Yes, the I'm sorry, Dennis show from September of 1997 with the Bret Hart match.
The retirement card.
The retirement card, correct.
Terry Funk's retirement card, of which he was back in the ring about 3 months later.
Pretty much, with pantyhose on his head. In any event, so check us. That'll be that'll be taped later this week, and we'll air next week here on the network. The September episode of Wrestle Tracks, and of course, join Dave and I next month for our October episode of Through the Looking Glass. We don't know what we'll talk about yet, but we always find something saucy to discuss. So we hope you enjoy it. Enjoy all the wrestling. Of course, Place to Be Nation's main event, where we preview all the biggest shows from WWE, AEW, and TNA. As a matter of fact, when this drops, if you're listening to this the day that it dropped, coming up this Friday will be the next episode. Or maybe it'll be next week. Actually, next week. Let me do that again. Next week will be the next episode of Main Event. We will preview WWE Bad Blood. Bad Blood 97. What could Sid have been at that? No, I guess not. That would have been interesting. Sid is Kane. No, forget it. God, no.
That's gotta be Sid. That's gotta be Sid.
That's gotta be Sid. Could you imagine? Anyway, so join us for next month's Through the Looking Glass. We'll have a fun topic for you. So enjoy the rest of your September. For Dave, I am Scott, and we will see you in October through the Looking Glass.